Hello and welcome back to the Adventures in Marketing podcast. I am your host, Gwen Montoya. I'm a marketing strategist and my work focuses on making marketing not scary, making marketing concepts accessible, and I'm really glad that you're here with me today. If this is your first time, thank you so much for joining me. It means the world that you are trying something new. I don't know how you found me, but thank you for being here. If you are a returning listener, thank you for coming back. You always send me the most lovely notes and tell me how helpful the podcast is to you. So thank you very much for the kind words. It means a lot. Thank you. So today's episode is actually a little bit different than one that I've done before because this is something that I don't normally focus on. I get a lot of requests for it and I share a lot of resources, but I've never actually done a podcast on this topic because it's not something that I focus on necessarily in my work. But it's so needed, it's so necessary, and I got frustrated enough with the lack of resources on this topic to go ahead and write a huge blog post about it. And now I'm recording a podcast for you. So the topic is funding for small business owners, especially women-owned businesses. This is such an important topic to talk about, and there's so many resources out there, but they can kind of be confusing. They can kind of be hard to find. And I really think post-COVID, I think that a lot of resources dried up very quickly in COVID. I think with as many people who were suddenly in need to keep their doors open and to get support, I think a lot of grants and resources pre-COVID kind of got burned out and run through really, really quickly. And so a lot of times when I was doing research for a client, I would find things that weren't really in effect anymore. They hadn't been updated in a couple of years. The pages were, the websites weren't even live anymore. So I wanted to put together a fresh resource that talked about funding resources for small business owners in a way that was really easy and all in one place, because that was the other thing that I was finding is that I could find 5 or 6 different grants for small business owners on 5 or 6 different websites. And somewhere else was crowdfunding and somewhere else was loans. So I wanted to put something together where it was just all in one place for you and it was really easy to access. So that's what this blog post is about. And don't worry, I'm going to link everything in the show notes for you. But I kind of wanted to also talk about the blog post or talk about the resources that I share and give some more context that I wasn't necessarily able to put into the blog post. So first of all, when you go to the blog post, please know that I don't do any kind of affiliate marketing in my business. So none of the links there, you click on anything, I don't get paid for anything. Every resource is something that I did as much vetting as I possibly could from the outside. I also only used free resources with the exception of some of the, be certified as a woman-owned business, etc. Some of those do cost money to be certified. It's like a yearly fee, so you'll have to look into that. I also did not include anything that was state specific. So if you wanted to do your own research, you could probably put in your own state or your own city and look for grants or crowdfunding or loans, for your specific city or your specific area. I wanted this to be as general as possible. And I also didn't include anything that seemed to be a one-time, like only for 2022 or only for 2021, but again, was not updated. So this was designed to be comprehensive, as inclusive as possible, not just in resources, but who the funding is intended for, and as easy to dig into as possible. So I hope that that's what it is. I've gotten some really great feedback, but I wanted to talk about it here because there are some things that it's just helpful to be aware of. So I'm going to go through the different types of the different types of funding first, and then I'll go a little bit of a deep dive into each one because I happen to have some experience with a couple of different types of funding. So the first thing to keep in mind is that funding is one of the biggest challenges in my experience to small businesses. They often reach a certain point where they need to upgrade their equipment. They need to get more equipment. They have outgrown their space. They've taken on every single thing that they can take on by themselves, and they need to hire out help or they need to outsource, and they get stuck. And I have seen so many businesses grow to a certain point and then stop because they didn't have access to funding. They didn't know how to find it. They just kind of hit a wall and just thought that's as far as they could go. And for some businesses, I think that some businesses just have a life cycle. They are designed to be in the world for a certain amount of time, and then that period of that business owner's life ends. They close the business, they move on, they do something else. I think that is also a valid choice. But for a lot of businesses, they would really like to keep going. They just are stuck. So let's go through the different types of funding options, and I'll explain a little bit about each one, and then I have some insight. So the first one I'm going to talk about is crowdfunding, because I think that this is one that gets a lot of attention and a lot of people don't realize how much work it is. In fact, I have an entire podcast episode just about crowdfunding. So if you're thinking about crowdfunding, please go check that out. So crowdfunding a small business is like taking on another job all by itself. It is a ton of work. You actually need to start like 3 months before your launch date. So this is not an experience where you just get the idea for a crowdfunding on Wednesday and then launch it on Friday, with very, very rare exceptions. It's just a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. We are fighting against so much noise in the world and on social media and in email lists, and you have to rally your supporters, and there's a lot to it. The good news is there are classes that are put on by this really great group or this really great organization called iFundWomen, which it's all linked in the blog post for you. You can go and sign up and take classes. You can learn how to do it well. Kickstarter will also have, I believe, free resources and blog posts. Look at what worked in the past. Look at how you can replicate that. Really look at these crowdfunding campaigns that you are examining and try to figure out what worked, what didn't work, where they went wrong, what you would do different. Because when you start thinking in that mindset, you can start to improve your own chances. So that's the big piece about crowdfunding, is it is just so much more work than a lot of people think it is. And it's also really important to remember that if this is a crowdfunding for a significant amount of money, you have to get outside of your own circle, because your own circle will be probably like the first round of supporters, but there is so much more money that you need to raise, and your immediate circle can't do that. So part of your marketing strategy for the crowdfunding has to be getting outside of your own audience, which is where something like Kickstarter or iFundWomen or Indiegogo, all of these have resources available and have their own platform specific ways to do well on those platforms. So whichever crowdfunding, if that's the way you're going to go, whichever crowdfunding platform you use, make sure that you spend a lot of time researching what does well on the platform and take full advantage of every single opportunity that you have to learn from the platform while you are there. Next, I want to talk about grants just a little bit. There are so many grants out there, but again, if you don't understand where to look, you don't understand how to apply, you are missing those opportunities. Again, in the blog post, one of the links is actually how to apply for grants, and then also huge resources of where to find grants. Grants are free money, essentially, but they do take work. They can be really competitive. It takes practice, so it is possible that you will apply for a couple of grants and get passed over because you weren't following the rules, which, not that you've done anything wrong, it's just a different way of thinking. It's a different way of approaching things. If you're going to apply for grants, definitely do some YouTube University to learn how to apply for grants, best practices. Anytime you're looking for anything on YouTube, make sure that you're looking for, 2022 and later, 2023 and later, whatever the year it is when you're listening to this podcast, this year and the previous year and maybe the previous year, depending on what the content is good. If you go back to like 2016, it's just too hard to tell what is best practices, what has evolved, and what has changed, especially with all of the changes in the world post-COVID and everything else. Grant applications may change over time. And so you don't want to be taking somebody's advice who, wrote a grant 5 years ago at that one time. You really want something that's a little bit more fresh. That's number one. Number two is keep track of where you are applying, how you are applying, due dates. A lot of times these kinds of grants only happen once a year and they have a very specific deadline for you to follow. I would set up a database, using something like Airtable, using something like Excel that lists all of the information in one place. So the grant, the link that you need, any information, any deadlines, any secondary deadlines, any follow-up things you have to do, any paperwork that you have to get together. Because if you're going to go after grants as a funding resource for your business, I don't think it's a matter of going after a grant. It's going to make more sense to go after multiple grants. However, that gets complicated, especially when you are dealing with, you submit it and then 3 or 4 months later you hear back. So that would be my best advice for grants. The other thing is that they can be really intimidating. They can be so intimidating. I actually had a client once who was a grant writer. And that is something that you can also hire. You can hire somebody to write a grant for you or to help educate you about a grant. Again, before you hire anybody, just make sure that you vet them, make sure that they have a portfolio, make sure that you have testimonials you can read or somebody that you can talk to that they have actually worked with. Just vet your people. That's why I've been saying that a lot lately. Vet your people, make sure that you are hiring somebody who can help you. But again, there are a lot of resources that are free. You can talk to your local small business administration, your local SCORE mentors. Both of those are going to have resources and free mentoring and free guides and a ton of information for you. All you have to do is reach out. And again, that information is all linked in the blog post for you. So I would absolutely start with SCORE mentors and your local SBA. Talk to those folks first to figure out what your best options are, where their resources are, and what they can do to help you. The other really great thing about both of those is that you get to talk to business people who have experience and who want to help you succeed. And I think we all need cheerleaders in our corner and people who have resources that we don't have. So that's what I will say about grants. The other thing, I said I was done, but I'm not. I lied. The other thing with grants is that when it comes to government grants, now you might think I'm not a government contractor. I'm not going to work with a government. That's not really my job. Weirdly, there are actually a lot of grants that small businesses who wouldn't necessarily think of themselves as government contractors can apply for it. One example I heard, and I can't remember what exactly the context was, but this was actually somebody who worked to help people get state government grants. This particular person was when I talked to her. And she had mentioned that somebody who gave guitar lessons was able to apply for a government contract about the guitar lessons because that was something that was needed within the office or something. I don't remember the exact details, but I remember thinking that is wild and I would never expect that. And it completely opened up my eyes to how that can work. So government grants, government contracts, a lot of those kinds of things, you need to be certified as, or it can benefit you to be certified as a women-owned business, a minority-owned business, a disability-owned business, a veteran-owned business, etc. So if you are any of those things, you can go through a process to be certified that you are that type of business. It's a little bit of a headache from my understanding for the first couple of years. There's a lot of documentation, a lot of deadlines, again, to keep track of. But once you're done, it is just pretty easy to renew. And there is, I believe, a yearly fee. But again, that opens you up to a lot of things that maybe you would not have access to if you didn't do that. So definitely something to consider, especially if you have any possibility of getting grants or getting government contracts for this kind of thing. Next, I want to talk about loans and microloans. Now, this is not something I have a ton of experience in, but I think it's really important to think about if we're going to be signing a loan for our business, we have to be clear about what we are signing up for. So a lot of the loan resources that I shared, I vetted them as best I could, but some of the interest rates and some of the terms on these things are really wild. So make sure that you understand what you are agreeing to, what the loan rate is, any kinds of discounts that you might get. Some offer a discount if you sign up for automatic payments when the loan time is due. Make sure that your lender makes it really easy for you to manage and access the loan. If there's any customer service hiccups, that's like a huge red flag. Don't go just like when you hire anybody or you go with any service, don't go with just the first person that you talk to. Definitely shop around, start making lists, figure out what's going to work for you, what you are excited about, what you're not excited about. There are private lenders, that you can find online. And there are also SBA, Small Business Administration loans that you can gain access to. Again, do your research, talk to the Small Business Administration. They can help you find the right loan for you, help you get the paperwork, help you figure out what you need and what you don't need. So traditional loans are more of what we would think of where it's like kind of like a business credit card. You can get loans to purchase equipment, like we talked about earlier. There's also a type called invoice financing where the loan that you get gets paid back from your invoices. I believe Square does something like this, which can sound really good, but can also put you further and further behind if your invoicing isn't really robust. So just be aware of all of the pitfalls. Basically, assume the worst case scenario and plan from there versus planning the best case scenario. There are also short-term loans, or they're microloans. So these are for a typical loan might be, $100,000 when we're talking for business, which might be way more than you would ever need. Maybe you just need a $10,000 loan or a $5,000 loan or something very small like that. Those typically fall under microloans. Technically, actually, anything up to $50,000 is a microloan. But the microloans, you can get them through the Small Business Administration. Again, Kiva is another organization. There's a lot of organizations that can help you do that. Some even focus on women-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses because they themselves are run by women or minorities and want to support that community. But just again, watch your terms, pay attention to what the interest rates are. Maybe sit down when you first read those interest rates because they can be pretty high. But depending on what you need in your business, it may be the solution that you're looking for. And then again, we have just a lot of research here, a lot of vetting, and a lot of making sure that what you are actually paying for, because that's what you're going to be doing, is actually something that you can handle. I think that would be the biggest thing. We also have, finally in the blog post, I do talk a little bit about angel investors. I think that a lot of small businesses have a misunderstanding about what angel investors are, how they work, especially because it sounds really great. Angel sounds amazing, and it doesn't sound like a loan, which sounds great. It sounds like an angel comes and gives you money. That sounds like fantastic. But for a lot of really small businesses, the more micro businesses, it's just you or you and like 3 people, angel investors may not be interested in the type of business that you have and in what you offer. I did want to include some resources in case you are a type of business that would be a good match for angel investing. So there are some resources there as well. Again, I did vet these as best I could from the outside. I hope that it is helpful. I hope that you find something in either the grants, the loans, the microloans, or the crowdfunding that will help you if you need funding for your business. I sincerely hope that you reach out to both SCORE and to the SBA. They both have tremendous amounts of resources, both from being able to talk to somebody and also on their website. So that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that this gives you some inspiration, some ideas, and if this is helpful for you, please feel free to share it. Again, the link is in the podcast show notes, because I really want to spread far and wide, because as far as I know, a resource like this doesn't really exist, at least not that is updated, that has all of these resources and all of the links that you need in one place so that you can explore funding for your business. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will talk to you next time.